I'm Rolene Marks. It's that time of the day again where we take a look at the top stories making headlines on Israel. And we do it right here on the Israel Brief, brought to you by Lay of the Land. And we do it every Monday to Thursday. So let's take a look at those top stories making headlines, and we begin with Lag BaOmer that starts tonight and tomorrow as Jews around the world will celebrate this festival. There will be the lighting of bonfires, and of course there will be the annual pilgrimage to Meron in the north of the country. Now, this marks a year, tonight marks a year since the horrible tragedy that took place this time last year at Mount Meron, which saw a stampede of people that cost the lives of 45 men and boys and injured hundreds of others. So in order to learn the lessons from last year and to take precautions so that we don't see tragedy repeating itself, the police have put the following restrictions in place. Anybody who wants to visit Meron will have to pre-order a ticket, and only 16,000 pilgrims will be allowed in the site at any given time, and they will only be allowed there for a period of 4 hours. There will be no private vehicles allowed close to the site. Instead, anybody wanting to make pilgrimage will be redirected to where they can take public transport, and that will ensure control of numbers. There will be no food sold on site as well, and we hope that this year's event goes without event and certainly without tragedy. However, earlier today, police arrested members of an extreme ultra-Orthodox sect for trying to sabotage the infrastructure on Mount Meron. Last week, we brought you the story of a 65-year-old woman who had been suspected of sending threatening letters containing bullets to the Prime Minister and his family. Well, her name has been made public as she has been charged today under threatening the Prime Minister. Her name is Ilana Sporthania. Ilana Sporthania, the 65-year-old from Ashkelon, who will be facing charges of threatening the Prime Minister. She sent him threatening letters containing bullets and is known to be a social media agitator as well. 50 years after the last ambassador was sent to Chad, the Central African Republic, Israel has now sent an official envoy to present his credentials to the president. Chad and Israel renewed bilateral relations in January 2019, and this is the first time since 50 years ago that there will be an exchange of ambassadors. A very, very good move. Excuse me, a very good move indeed. And it also shows that African countries are really starting to warm up to the state of Israel. Many of them are of the opinion that they shouldn't have to choose sides in a conflict that they are not involved in. And that while they can sympathize and empathize with the cause of the Palestinians, they can also show their support for the state of Israel and work together and look at ways to cooperate, especially when that cooperation provides dividends and means support for their own people. A very good move indeed. And we're just wondering if the government of South Africa is paying attention to this as we speak. South Africa's government is known to be extremely hostile to the state of Israel. And our final story takes us to the Ukraine, and Israel's Ministry of Defense have confirmed that they have dispatched at least 2,000 helmets and 500 flak jackets to be given to rescue operations or rescue organizations on the ground in Ukraine. The shipment will be received by Ukrainian officials, and many are saying, could we see a shift in Israel's careful neutral policy towards both Russia and Ukraine as Russia's invasion of Ukraine now approaches the 3-month mark? Yesterday, we brought you the story of Russia firing on Israeli jets in Syria, the first time that this has happened. And while we have seen some very, very harsh reprimands of Russia and condemnation of the human rights violations caused by this invasion, ties between the two countries have been relatively good. In fact, Israel does have to cooperate with Russia because we have a Russian military presence on our border in Syria, ensuring that Israel can continue to strike Iranian targets as need be. But we will have to monitor the situation as it unfolds in the next couple of weeks to see if there is a definitive change in Israeli policy towards Russia. Now, this brings us to the end of our top stories, but don't forget to check out our website on www.layoftheland.online. We have news published today that you may only find on our site, news from the Arab world. So listen to the voices of Arab journalists that you might not hear in your mainstream media. We are on Facebook. Our community there is growing. We would love if you are a part of it by liking us, following us, and sharing our content. And you can find us at Lottel's site with this kind of profile picture. We're also on YouTube. We're growing there as well. And if you haven't already subscribed, please click on the red subscribe button below, because that way it really helps get as much news from Israel and Israel's narrative out to as many people as possible. And of course, we're on Twitter at layoftheland5. Follow us and interact with us there. So all that remains is for me to wish you a happy Lag BaOmer. Please stay safe wherever you are. I'm Rolene Marks. This is the Israel Brief. Thank you for watching, and join me again tomorrow for your top stories before we head off into the weekend.